Welcome to A Brief History Conspiracy.
This week, the Younger Dryas.
Hi, if you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like the video, and it really does help. So, okay, so the Younger Dryas event. This is, in our chronology, is 12,800 years ago to about 11,600 years ago. And it is a sudden blip in global temperatures.
Yeah. Some rapid climatic changes occur at the start, through the period, and at the end of the period.
I think we see two very sudden temperature increases of about 10 degrees centigrade, which I think, current climate change panickers are talking. We're really worried about a 2-degree increase in average global temperatures.
Yeah.
This saw a 10-degree sudden increase in global temperatures.
Possibly over a shorter time period than the
Less than
2
a decade,
degree
possibly.
In the last 150 years.
Yeah.
They're talking 10 degrees
and then,
within a decade.
And then
so.
It cooled, and then it happened again. Really, really close together.
Yeah.
And then we saw a return of the ice.
Yeah,
and then,
in the period in between, return of the ice and the glaciers.
And then pretty much a sudden warming again back to sort of the trend temperature sort of thing.
Yeah, pretty much where it was at 12,800 years.
Yeah, because we are talking about a period where we were coming out of the last major ice age. The Earth's temperature, the Earth was steadily warming in this period.
Yeah.
And then there's just this massive blip. Why is it called the Younger Dryas?
Because of the Dryas flower.
Yeah.
And I think
there's an older Dryas flower and a younger Dryas flower.
Okay.
So this Younger Dryas apparently went extinct during this period and then reappeared just after it. So during this period, the Younger Dryas flower disappeared, and after this event, it came back. So
okay.
Simple as that. They named it after a flower. Oh, pretty. Some of the things that really happened though in this period was the pulse water events.
Yeah, the sea level rises that coincided with the massive temperature rises at 12,800 and then again at 11,600 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, the first pulse water 1A would have been something like, even the mainstream science thinks it was about 25 metres, which is just ridiculous. What's that, like 75 to 100 feet in that region?
Which is significant. And the pulse 1B about 15 metres or so.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. The people that talk about this a lot on, and you've got to go Joe Rogan, it's Randall Carlson, a big bearded fellow. I talk about him in my future episode actually quite a lot.
Yes, you did mention him.
Because he talks about climate change and how actually climate change is normal. We shouldn't really worry about it as much as we probably are. And I think Graham Hancock talks about this a lot as well, doesn't he?
He does, yeah. I
think they think that these pulse water events probably were more significant than the mainstream they're talking about.
Yeah, hundreds of feet.
Yeah,
instead of 75 feet, maybe. They're talking, hundreds. So
it's not just a sea level rise, is it, as well? I think we're talking flooding and mass events that would have been pretty much worldwide. I think this is probably whether we get the story in the Bible for the Great Deluge.
Well, that and most other ancient texts that speak of a Great Deluge as well. It's not unique to Christianity
almost
or
every
even the
religious,
Abrahamic faith.
Almost every religious story which is amazing if you think about it. If this actually is what inspired those stories, that this is a story from 13,000 years ago that we still tell today.
And still pass on.
Just through word of mouth and telling stories. It's
probably tells you the sheer level of destruction that occurred at that point on the planet was that severe, that great.
That the people that survived thought it was worth telling.
and they kept pursuing that generation after generation.
Yeah, and made myths from it, and it would have been terrifying, and I mean it also nearly wiped us out. So I did the last ice age, we went down to about 10,000, and this event, which we're going to talk about in a bit, there was mass extinction events, and I think it was 75% of all the megafauna in North America were died off at 12,800 years ago. We'll come to that in a minute though, but I mean, the other thing is the sea level rises a lot of the mainstream science believe that the sea level rises that we see now, because at the last ice age, sea level was much lower.
Yep.
Anything up to about 100 meters lower, which would be about that 300 feet we were talking about. You see things like England there was no North Sea. We were unfortunately connected to France. So, and then there was much larger land mass than there is now, because the sea levels were much lower, because it was all captured in ice. So we got the sea level rises, but then these pulses would have caused sudden sea rises, and they're not sudden because from coral reef evidence.
Yes, there's a lot of evidence from the coral reefs, isn't there?
Coral reef basically needs to grow at a certain depth where it can get the light, and it doesn't grow. So if it
only grows in the shallow basin, doesn't it, to a certain depth?
Yeah, they found ancient coral from it's basically fossilized coral in the Gulf of Mexico region, and they can see like a step effect. So if sea levels had risen steadily, you'd see the coral just growing up the
you see it layered.
But they don't. They see step, which then suggests a very, very sudden sea level rise,
which coincides perfectly with the with this evidence from the Younger Dryas period of the warming, isn't it?
And you got to remember as well, humanity has always sort of lived near the coast. It's where the most resources are. Yeah. So for humans, they may have moved steadily as sea levels rose, but then having this sudden impact of sea must have been interesting. Yeah. You can see why that we maybe lost a lot of. Why our numbers dropped so dramatically, because almost all of us would have lived near the oceans.
Yeah, I mean today 70%, I think 60 to 70% of the world's major cities are located
within 30 miles of the ocean.
30 miles of the coast, and can't be more than feet or 100 feet above sea level.
Well, you think about almost all of our major cities: New York, Tokyo, London. Almost every major city you can think of either lives near a river, which would have flooded as well, or the rivers would have, chances are, we would have seen massive flooding.
Massive flooding across the floodplains.
Or they're on the coastline. This is where we live, so it would have been a massive impact. We get a lot of this evidence for how this happened from core samples, mainly from Greenland. We dig down and take these ice cores, and then it's
and the poles, I think, as well. Both the poles they're taken from.
What are they looking for when they look at it? It's something to do with isotopes, isn't it? When
I mean, really, basically, it's just the process by which glaciers are formed. There's an intermediate stage between the snow falling, it being compressed into ice. It forms part of the glacier. So when they take ice cores of the glacier, you get layers.
It's like reading a book, isn't it? It's like pages of a book.
Yeah, so you can analyse each layer, which is basically a year's sedimentation of the snow.
And you can see what levels of oxygen, things like this, are in that bit of ice, and you can tell what the environment was like.
We know from our understanding of oxygen isotopes that the temperature alters the what's the word? Yeah, it alters the variation or alters the abundance of the relative of these isotopes.
So dependent on how much isotopes there are is how warm or cold it is.
Yeah, the abundance of different isotopes of oxygen, it tells you temperature basically.
But we have to ask what caused this event then, because was it a natural event? Did something happen? I mean, from our previous videos, we actually know it was the Annunaki. So I don't even know why we're asking this thing. It was Nibiru. We know it was. Nibiru came by. As we've already discussed, Enki wasn't very happy with us, so no, Elil wasn't very happy with us, so he wiped us out. Or God did it. So either way, so that's the end of the video. Done. God did it. Move on.
So the interesting thing is, though, the supposed orbit of Nibiru is a 3,600-year orbital period.
Yeah.
However, the ice core samples tend to show significant events occurring about every 13,000 years or so through the course of human history for the last couple of 100,000 years, as the oldest human remains we know
so
of.
it's every
about
3 or 4 times it comes past.
I think the oldest Homo sapien remains that we found are about 180,000 years old.
About 250 now. It gets
is it
pushed back.
250? Is it getting pushed 250 now? Is it okay?
220 to 250, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, it's just I forgot where I was headed with that now.
We're fucked. Every 13,000 years we get battered by something.
Yeah,
and we
no,
don't know
but
what it
I
is.
was saying that the orbital
Yeah.
period of Nibiru is supposedly 3,600 years.
Mm.
Well, that seems too frequent for what the ice core samples are showing us for Nibiru to.
But it wouldn't necessarily
exist.
come close enough to us, necessarily, would it? If it's
Every
orbit, it depends where the Earth is when it comes past.
Yes.
It could be like every 3 or 4 times it comes by, it actually gets close to us. Doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
mean it gets close to us.
No, that's a fair point. Actually,
Or
that is a good point. Yes.
It doesn't exist, which is also
Well,
another
it's also another
possibility.
possibility. Yes. But I just suddenly thought about the time period of that against this 13,000 year destruction cycle that we seem to have on this planet, and
But
they don't quite link. But yeah, that's a very good point.
If we think that maybe it wasn't God, and maybe it wasn't the Anunnaki, are there other causes? What
Well,
are they?
cause the temperature spikes at 12,800 and 11,600 years ago. Well, when you go through a process of elimination, the only option that you're really left with that could cause that kind of level of temperature increase so quickly is a very significant instantaneous event, like an asteroid impact.
Right.
They don't really have any other ideas
Yeah.
of what
think there's-
what to suggest that it could have been. I don't think.
I think there's a scientist, Alan West. He reminds me of Adam West. I immediately started thinking about Batman when I was reading about this guy. I don't know why. Adam West was ace. Yeah, there's been like a discovery of like the thing they call the black mat, which is a sedimentary layer made up of nanodiamonds and carbon spheral things and charcoal soot and all this made in this black line. Like you said about this book.
Similar to the remnants that they find within the black line of the dinosaur extinction 65 million years ago.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah. So, I mean, they're talking about, if you look, like, say, you have this book event of sediment, so sediment layers on top of sediment, you can dig down through it and you can really flick through pages of history.
Yeah, layers of time.
There's sometimes this is called the Clovis extinction event, because there was this Clovis people in North America.
Yeah.
They think there was the first humans in North America. We're going to come back to that in another episode.
I suspect not.
And they can see that in this place called Murray Springs, they're doing the archaeology, and they're finding there's archaeology of the Clovis people. So that, you're finding shards of whatever, arrowheads and pottery and fires, and black mat, nothing. So it would seem that around this period, the Clovis people got a battering.
Yes.
And these carbon spherals and nanodiamonds, they say they are formed by meteor impact, by some sort of massive impact anyway.
Yeah, these observations of these nano particles of certain substances are only known to be present following an asteroid
or
impact.
nuclear blast. Sometimes nuclear blast can
Yeah,
cause the same
sometimes
things.
nuclear can cause...
Nuclear war. Maybe there was a nuclear war. We've already talked about it in the Mars episode. You don't know. No, we're not going that way. We're not going there. So, I mean, they've also think that they recently think they actually found 2 craters that could explain this in the Hiawatha crater, and they think there's actually 2 impact craters very close to each other, but we've only found these recently because we've been able to use satellite imaging because they're under a glacier.
Okay.
So, I mean, the one of these is 31 kilometres across. That's a big impact crater.
Yes.
That's
a significant extinction level event. I'm trying to think what's the crater at the Yucatan Peninsula for the dinosaurs. Although I thought Randall Carlson was speculating that the 12,800 years ago was an asteroid impact into the North American ice sheet. Was that covering over North America and Greenland at that time then?
Greenland would think. I think they're just talking about that ice sheet would have been across the whole area. These 2 in the Hiawatha craters, they've estimated that they're anything from this period to 1 million years old. So these may or may not be but they're a possible site.
They're a possible site for...
We need to go and actually dig down to it, but the problem is it's under like a couple of miles of ice. So it's a bit.
I'm guessing we're not digging that out anytime soon.
No. But actually, with global warming, it'll be tropical there very shortly. So I mean, give it another 10 years, that'll have melted, and we can find out. So, but I agree. I just think if a meteorite hit the ice shelf, hit the north region during this ice age, where the ice did come down past, it would have gone into North America, there may not have been much of an impact crater at all. If you can imagine it hitting ice, it would have melted. It would explain
especially
the melt
couple
water.
of mile thickness of ice.
Yeah.
Would I think the momentum and the kinetic energy that an asteroid has travelling at ridiculous speeds through space.
Yeah, we're talking thousands of miles an hour.
Yeah, we're talking tens of thousands of miles an hour, even maybe 40,000 miles an hour. So something in that sort of ballpark.
Our satellites travel at about 20 to 25,000 miles an hour. So another object is when they hit us, it's 40 to 50,000 miles an hour.
I just think that the sheer kinetic energy that the object has, it probably would still create an impact crater, and it would totally melt the 2 mile thickness of ice with that kind of level of energy.
I could generally see there not being an impact crater. I could generally see it seeing, if it hit the ice where it's reasonably thick, I could generally see no impact crater. Just a massive... Because it'd be...
It's possible there'd be no impact crater. I think there might be, just to the sheer energy involved in it. But possible there isn't one.
But if you're thinking about this Hiawatha craters that are 31 kilometres wide, can you imagine that though? If that had just hit land, normal land, that would have created a much bigger crater potentially, because if it would have had to have gone through the ice first. So that would have taken a lot of the impact, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So
a lot of the energy had been taken out by the ice.
It's then gone through 2 layers of ice and still created a crater.
Yes.
That big. How big was that object?
Well, precisely, yeah.
That would have thrown... It would have created a nuclear winter. It would have thrown all this meltwater, which would have caused this meltwater pulses that we're talking about, where sea levels would have risen suddenly. But also, it would have thrown significant water into the atmosphere. So you're talking clouds, rainfall, causing flooding worldwide. You'd be talking about fires across vast areas, which explains why we see soot and shock quartz and charcoal and all these things in this black matte sediment layer. The devastation would have gone far, far further. If anything, I think we maybe be luckily hit the ice.
Because it could have been much more devastating than it was if it hadn't have hit a thick ice. A thick ice sheet. Yeah, completely agree. Yeah, it could have been a lot more devastating if it had hit land. They talk about there being 2 impacts as well, and actually there are 2 impact craters, 2 impacts, 1,200 years apart, that would have caused. So that's not going to be what I mean. Is that's very unlikely they'd have hit the same area. No. They're not sure, are they? I think there's more evidence for there being an asteroid that hit 12,800 years ago because of the similar black line in the
black mat level,
similar to the extinction of the dinosaurs that we know was caused by an asteroid from our research into that many years ago. To be honest, now, but
yes, it's pretty much considered fact now, isn't it?
There's not as much evidence, and I don't think that Randall Carlson has a site in mind for 11,600 years ago. But they think that maybe it could have been.
That's just a suspicion, isn't it? I think at the moment they suspect there was a second impact, but they're not sure. There's another massive impact crater at Antarctica as well, which is there's been only very recently discovered, and that's again this sort of size
under an ice sheet again.
It will be under a massive ice sheet again. So it's so awkward. They're always hiding. They find massive ones in water as well, and you think again, if going through hitting water, which is an amazing shock absorber, and then still hitting we've been hit by very large objects at times.
It's amazing.
If that had happened over a city,
like 2 million square miles.
Yeah, now that would be really big. 2
million
square miles.
No, it's not that big.
As humans and the Clovis people migrated through Greenland into North America, and we just went on a mass killing spree and just slaughtered everything in our path. I mean, we got a bloodlust for for a couple hundred years, and we made the mammoth extinct.